Dr. Yunji stepped off the medical shuttle onto the surface of Kepler 442b and immediately began setting up a field hospital in the colony's central plaza, while Valthian survivors watched with mixture of curiosity and desperate hope. The humans had saved them from Corvan slavers, but now came the real test of whether these strange aliens could actually cure a plague that had defeated the galaxy's most advanced medical civilization. Taemin approached the human medical team, with Hyejin beside him, and both Valthians were surprised by how small and fragile these rescuers appeared compared to other galactic species. The humans wore simple medical uniforms instead of the elaborate biosuits that advanced civilizations used for plague work, and their equipment looked primitive compared to Valthian biotechnology. Administrator Taemin and Chief Medical Officer. Hyejin, I presume, Dr. Yunji said through her translation device while extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. I am Dr. Yunji of the Terran Medical Corps, and we are here to help your people survive this plague outbreak. Hyejin studied the human doctor with professional interest and noticed that these aliens had evolved from predatory species, unlike the peaceful herbivores that dominated galactic civilization. Their forward-facing eyes and prominent canine teeth suggested a violent evolutionary history, but their behavior showed genuine concern for Valthian suffering. Dr. Yunji, we are grateful for your military assistance against the Corvan raiders, but I must ask about your medical capabilities. Hyejin said carefully. This bioplague has resisted every treatment in our medical databases, and our biotechnology cannot even slow its progress through infected patients. Yunji smiled with the confidence of someone who had studied the enemy and found its weaknesses. Chief Medical Officer, your people are dying from a modified version of hemorrhagic fever, viruses that are common on Earth, she explained. The plague was engineered to attack Valthian physiology, but humans have natural resistance to the base pathogen. The human medical team began unpacking their equipment, and Taemin was puzzled by what he saw because everything looked crude and mechanical compared to the elegant biological solutions that Valthians preferred. Instead of bioscanners that could diagnose diseases at the cellular level, the humans used metal instruments and chemical compounds that seemed almost barbarically simple. Medical technician Jin A worked with Sunwoo to establish treatment stations throughout the plaza, and the Valthian was amazed by how quickly the humans adapted their procedures to alien physiology. The human equipment might look primitive, but it was designed to work in battlefield conditions where sophisticated technology would fail. Dr. Yunji, how can your primitive medical techniques cure a plague that defeated our advanced biotechnology? Hyejin asked with scientific curiosity overcoming her desperation. Your instruments appear to be centuries behind current galactic medical standards. Yunji pulled up her analysis of the plague samples on a simple computer screen that would have looked ancient to most galactic species, but contained the solution to their crisis. The virus was engineered using Earth pathogens as a base, but the creators assumed that simple biological modifications would make it unstoppable, she explained. They did not account for human medical experience with similar diseases. The human treatment plan was aggressive and direct in ways that shocked the Valthians because their medical philosophy emphasized gentle biological harmony rather than warfare against disease. Dr. Yunji's approach treated the plague like an enemy to be destroyed rather than an imbalance to be corrected through sophisticated biotechnology. We will use modified human antibodies combined with antiviral compounds developed during Earth's own plague outbreaks, Yunji announced to the assembled medical staff. The treatment is harsh by galactic standards, but it attacks the virus using immune responses that evolved specifically to fight similar pathogens. Hyejin was skeptical when she examined the human treatment protocols because they involved introducing foreign biological material into Valthian patients without the careful genetic matching that her people considered essential for safe medicine. The human approach seemed reckless and dangerous, but her people were dying, and conventional treatments had already failed. The first test came when they treated a young Valthian named Wu Jin, who was in the final stages of the plague with red, spots covering his entire body and his blue blood turning black from internal hemorrhaging. Dr. Yunji administered her experimental treatment while monitoring his vital signs with human medical equipment that beeped and flashed in primitive but effective ways. Within 6 hours, Wu Jin's condition began to stabilize as the modified human antibodies attacked the plague virus with evolutionary fury, that had been refined through millions of years of biological warfare on Earth. The red spots faded, and his blood slowly returned to its normal blue color as his immune system learned to recognize and destroy the engineered pathogen. "This is impossible," Yi-Jin whispered, as she watched the human treatment succeed where all Vielthian medicine had failed. "How can primitive antibodies cure a plague that was specifically designed to kill our people?" Yunji explained the biological principles behind her treatment, while continuing to monitor Wu Jin's recovery. The plague creators used Earth viruses as their base, but they only modified the surface proteins to attack Vielthian cells, she said. The core viral mechanisms remained unchanged, which means human immune responses can still recognize and destroy the pathogen. News of the successful treatment spread through the colony faster than the plague had originally traveled, and surviving Vielthians lined up at the human medical stations with hope replacing despair in their large black eyes. Dr. Yunji and her team worked tirelessly to treat every infected patient while teaching Vielthian medical staff how to administer the human cure. Captain Do Hyun coordinated with Taimin to investigate the plague's origin, while their medical teams worked to save lives, and their research revealed disturbing evidence about the bioweapon's true nature. The virus had not evolved naturally but had been carefully engineered by someone with detailed knowledge of both human and Vielthian biology. "Administrator, this plague was not a natural outbreak, but a deliberate attack on your colony," Do Hyun explained while showing Taemin the genetic analysis that proved the virus was artificially created. "The Corvin raiders did not arrive here by coincidence, but were expecting to find dying refugees they could capture and sell." The investigation revealed that the plague had been introduced through the colony's water supply 3 weeks earlier by someone who understood Vielthian infrastructure and had access to restricted areas. The bioweapon was designed to kill quickly enough to prevent effective medical response, but slowly enough to allow slavers time to arrive and conduct evacuation operations. "Captain, who would have the knowledge and motivation to create such a specific bioweapon against my people?" Taemin asked, while studying the evidence that showed how carefully planned the attack had been. Do Hyun's expression was grim because the data suggested involvement by one of the galaxy's major civilizations rather than simple raiders or terrorists. "The genetic modifications require advanced biotechnology and detailed databases about multiple species," he explained. "This level of sophistication suggests either very advanced medical knowledge or access to galactic medical archives." While the investigation continued, Dr. Eunji worked with Hyojin to develop protocols for preventing future bioweapon attacks, and their collaboration produced fascinating insights about the differences between human and galactic approaches to medicine. The humans fought diseases like military campaigns, while other species tried to achieve biological harmony through gentle treatments. Dr. Yunji: "Your medical philosophy is very different from ours," Hyejin observed while learning to use human diagnostic equipment. "You treat illness like warfare rather than imbalance, and your treatments are aggressive rather than harmonious." Yunji nodded while checking on patients who were recovering from what should have been a death sentence. "Chief Medical Officer, humans evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill us, including our own diseases," she explained. "We learned to fight biological threats with overwhelming force rather than trying to negotiate with them. The human approach to medicine reflected their species' violent history and pragmatic philosophy, but it was saving Vielthian lives that sophisticated biotechnology could not protect." Within 3 days, the plague was in full retreat throughout the colony as human treatments destroyed the engineered virus with ruthless efficiency that impressed even the galaxy's most advanced medical minds. Captain Hyunwoo Kim stood on the bridge of the massive ship called Indomitable and watched the council station get smaller through the window. His face showed no feelings, but his hands were tight on the rail. Behind him, Communications Officer Sora Park checked her screens one more time and spoke in a calm voice that did not match the anger in her eyes. "All civilian ships have cleared council space, sir. The last transport just passed the jump gate." Hyunwoo nodded slowly. 50 billion humans were leaving everything they had ever known. They were going to empty space because 12 alien species had voted them out. The council had made it clear that humans were not welcome anymore. They said humans were too dangerous and too wild for civilized space. The big meeting hall on the council station had been full of alien voices 3 days ago. Ambassador Kale of the Zenthari species had stood up with his crystal-like skin shining under the lights. His voice had been cold when he read the final decision. The human species poses an unacceptable risk to galactic peace. Their aggressive nature and rapid military growth threatens the stability we have maintained for 1,000 years. They must leave our space within 7 days or face the combined forces of the Council. Dr. Tae-min Lee had been there in the meeting hall representing human science. He had tried to speak, but the Council would not listen. The aliens looked at humans like they were wild animals that might attack at any moment. Fear showed in their strange eyes whenever a human entered a room. Tae-min had recorded everything on his datapad. The insults, the lies about human violence, the way the Council members whispered to each other when humans spoke. All of it would go into the history files so future generations would know why humanity chose to leave instead of fight. The Council thought they knew humans well after 300 years of contact. They had seen human soldiers fight in border wars. They had watched human companies compete hard for trade deals. They had heard stories about Earth's bloody history before humans reached the stars. But they did not understand what made humans truly dangerous. Humans did not just fight when they were angry. They fought when they had to. They adapted when things got hard. They found ways to win even when everything seemed lost. The Council saw these things as threats to their peaceful way of life. Ambassador Kale had listed human crimes in his speech. Humans had developed new weapons too fast. Human colonies had grown too strong. Human traders had been too successful. Human diplomats had made too many friends with smaller species. Every strength that humans showed became evidence that they were dangerous. Sora Park had been listening to Council radio signals for weeks before the final vote. She heard alien leaders talking about the human problem in private meetings. They were not just afraid of human military power. They were afraid that other species might start acting like humans, working harder, growing faster, taking more risks. The Council liked things to stay the same. For 1,000 years, the same 12 species had ruled the galaxy. They made laws that kept everyone in their place. Strong species stayed strong, and weak species stayed weak. Technology grew slowly and carefully. No one was allowed to change, too much or too fast. Humans had broken those rules without meaning to. They had come from a small blue planet and spread across the galaxy in just 3 centuries. They built cities on dead worlds and made them green again. They found new ways to travel between stars. They turned empty space into homes for billions of people. Dr. Tae-min Lee walked onto the bridge and handed his datapad to Captain Hyunwoo. The files contained everything humans had learned about the Council in 300 years of contact. Trade secrets, military weaknesses, political divisions, information that could have been used to fight back if humans had chosen war. "All the colony ships are ready, sir," Tae-min said. "We have enough supplies for the journey to the Outer Rim. The navigation computers have found several systems that might work for settlement." Hyunwoo looked at the data and felt proud of his species. In 7 days, humans had organized the largest evacuation in galactic history. 50 billion people from 1,000 worlds had packed their lives into ships and prepared to leave. No panic, no fighting among themselves, no begging the Council to change their minds. The human fleet stretched across space like a metal river. Massive colony ships carried millions of families with everything they owned. Transport vessels moved. Food and machinery and the tools needed to build new worlds. Military ships protected the edges of the fleet, but they had not fired a single shot. Some aliens had expected humans to fight the exile order. Council military forces had prepared for battle. Weapons had been charged, and shields had been raised around important worlds. But humans had surprised them by choosing to leave peacefully. Admiral Dong-Soo Park commanded the military escort ships from his flagship Horizon. He had been ready to fight if the Council tried to stop the evacuation. His ships carried weapons that could crack planets and shields that could stop stars. But no alien ship had moved to block their path. The Council wanted humans gone, and humans were leaving. It should have been simple. But something felt wrong to the Admiral as he watched alien ships keep their distance. The Council members had looked too relieved in their final meeting, like they had solved a problem that had been keeping them awake at night. Navigator Mi-jin Seo checked the course to the Outer Rim one more time. The empty space beyond Council territory was unmapped and full of dangers. Ancient stories told of ships that went there and never came back. monsters that ate starlight, and machines that turned everything they touched into more machines. The Council had essentially sentenced humans to death by forcing them into that dark space. They probably expected human civilization to collapse within a few years. No trade partners, no support from other species, no safe ports to repair damaged ships. Just empty systems and whatever horrors waited in the dark between stars. Communications Officer Sora Park received the final message from human embassy staff on Council worlds. They had destroyed all sensitive files and locked down the buildings. Nothing useful would be left behind for alien intelligence services to study. Captain Hyunwoo gave the order to jump to hyperspace. The massive human fleet disappeared from Council sensors in flashes of blue light. Behind them, they left empty embassy buildings and abandoned trade stations. 300 years of human presence in civilized space was ending. Ambassador Kyle watched from the Council station as the last human ships vanished into hyperspace. He felt satisfied that the threat was finally removed. The galaxy could return to its proper order with humans safely contained in the wasteland beyond the border. But Dr. Tae-Min Lee had left one final gift for the Council in the abandoned human embassy. A computer file with a simple message that would not be found for months. It contained detailed maps of outer rim dangers and a warning about what happened to species that tried to expand into that space. The file ended with a single sentence. That would prove prophetic. "We go to face the darkness you were too afraid to enter. Remember that when it comes looking for you." Senior analyst Jae-hoon Choi walked through the empty halls of the human embassy on Nexus Prime 3 years after the Great Departure. Dust covered everything, and the air felt dead without the sound of human voices. His team of scientists had been given permission to study what humans had left behind. The Council wanted to understand why these strange beings had been so hard to control. Cultural specialist Mi Young-song stood in what used to be the military section of the embassy. Computer screens that had been wiped clean before the humans left were slowly giving up their secrets to her advanced recovery tools. What she found made her hands shake as she called for Jae-hoon to come see. "Look at this," Mi Young said in a voice tight with worry. "Their entire way of fighting is built around being the smaller force. They have been planning for wars against bigger enemies since before they left their home planet." The files showed human military thinking from thousands of years of Earth history. Small groups of fighters hiding in forests and mountains while they fought massive armies. Techniques for making a few soldiers seem like many. Ways to turn enemy strength into weakness. Methods for winning battles that should have been impossible to win. Jae-hoon studied the tactical manuals that explained something humans called guerrilla warfare. The word meant little war, but the methods were anything but small. Humans had spent centuries learning how to make their enemies afraid to leave safe areas. How to strike fast and disappear before anyone could fight back. How to turn every rock and tree into a potential threat. "They do not fight like we do," Mi Young continued as she pulled up more files. "We build big fleets and have proper battles with clear rules. Humans fight like the space between stars itself is their weapon." Technology analyst Dong-ho Kim was working in another part of the embassy where human scientists had once studied alien technology. His tools were finding traces of research that the humans had carefully hidden before they left. What he discovered made him call his teammates over immediately. Their technology growth was getting faster, not slower, Dong-ho said as he showed them recovered data files. "In their last 50 years in Council space, they developed things we do not even have theories for." The evidence was overwhelming. Human scientists had been working on projects that pushed the very limits of what physics allowed. Power sources that bent space itself, materials that could exist in several dimensions at once, weapons that could reach across time to destroy targets before they were even built. Most disturbing was a project file labeled simply as Prometheus Protocol. The details were too damaged to read completely, but the summary was clear enough. Humans had been preparing technology that could remake entire species at the genetic level. They could have turned any alien population into something new and different. Jae-hoon felt sick as he realized what this meant. The Council had been afraid that humans were becoming too powerful too quickly, but humans had already become more powerful than anyone suspected. They had just been very good at hiding it. Mi Young found more files in the diplomatic section that showed how humans really saw the galaxy. Their maps marked every council world with detailed notes about military strength, resource production, and political stability. They had been studying every species with the care of scientists, examining laboratory specimens. They knew exactly how to defeat each of us, Mi-young said, as she scrolled through battle plans that had never been used. Look at this analysis of Zenthari crystal technology. They found 17 different ways to disrupt the molecular bonds that hold Zenthari bodies together. The human files contained detailed studies of every council species, biological weaknesses, cultural blind spots, technological limitations, plans for economic warfare, psychological manipulation, and military strikes that would cripple entire civilizations without destroying them completely. But most shocking were the defensive plans. Humans had expected to be exiled or attacked eventually. They had prepared for evacuation scenarios, guerrilla resistance campaigns, and something they called the Scorched Galaxy Protocol. If pushed too far, humans were ready to destroy everything, rather than let the Council have it. Dong-ho found technical specifications for weapons that could make stars unstable, detailed instructions for biological weapons that would target specific alien genetic markers, plans for self-replicating machines that would strip entire systems bare of resources before moving on to the next target. They were not just planning to leave, Dong-ho said with growing fear. They were planning to make sure we would regret forcing them out. The team worked for weeks to piece together the full picture of human preparation. Every embassy on every council world had been an intelligence gathering station. Every human diplomat had been a spy. Every trade deal had been a way to map alien industrial capacity and find critical weak points. Jae-hoon wrote a detailed report for the council that painted a terrifying picture. Humans had not been surprised by the exile order. They had been expecting it and preparing for it for decades. The smooth evacuation that had impressed so many aliens had been practiced in secret many times. The report concluded with a warning that made Jae-hoon's hands shake as he typed it. Humans in exile would not become weaker or less dangerous. Cut off from the restrictions of council law and civilized behavior, they would become something far worse. The Outer Rim would either kill them or forge them into the most dangerous force the galaxy had ever seen. But when Jae-hoon tried to present his findings to the council, he found doors closed and appointments canceled. Ambassador Kale refused to meet with him. Other council members said they were too busy with more important matters. The few who would listen dismissed his warnings as human propaganda designed to make aliens afraid. Military command was the worst. Admiral Toth of the Hegemony Fleet actually laughed when Jae-hoon explained human tactical abilities. The alien warrior could not believe that a species with such a short military history could pose a real threat to civilizations that had been fighting wars for millennia. Let them play soldier in the empty systems, Admiral Toth said with contempt. Cut off from our technology and resources, they will stagnate and eventually destroy themselves fighting over scraps. Intelligence Director Vex of the Korthani was more polite, but equally dismissive. She pointed out that humans had left peacefully instead of fighting. This proved they were not as aggressive as the files suggested. Any species that would accept exile rather than resist was clearly not as dangerous as Jae-hoon claimed. The report was filed away in classified archives where it would gather electronic dust. Council leaders wanted to move on from the human problem. Trade was flowing again without human competition. Border disputes were settling into familiar patterns without human interference. The galaxy was returning to its proper order. Mi-young tried a different approach by sharing her findings with academic institutions across council space. But university administrators were afraid to publish research that contradicted official council position on human nature. Journals refused articles that suggested the exile might have been a mistake. Dong-ho attempted to warn military contractors about human technology capabilities. But companies that made weapons for council forces had no interest in hearing that. An exiled species might have superior designs. It was easier to assume that human technical advances had been exaggerated by fearful politicians. As months passed, the three scientists watched their warnings disappear into bureaucratic indifference. The council had convinced itself that humans were gone and no longer relevant. Any suggestion that the exile might create future problems was treated as disloyalty to council decision-making. But in the deep files of the human embassy, hidden, In systems that would take years to fully decode, lay evidence of something that would have terrified the Council if they had been willing to look. Humans had not just been preparing to leave Council space. They had been preparing to return someday under very different circumstances. The final file that Jae-hoon found was labeled simply as Homecoming. It contained no details, just a single line that made his blood freeze. When we return, it will not be as refugees seeking shelter. It will be as teachers bringing lessons learned in the dark. 3 years after human departure, the Council celebrated the stability and peace that their decisive action had brought. They had removed a chaotic element from galactic civilization and restored proper order. The human threat was over, and the future looked bright for all civilized species. None of them noticed the strange energy signatures that were beginning to appear at the edge of their sensor networks. Signals that suggested something was moving in the dark space beyond the galactic rim. Something that had learned to survive where survival should have been impossible. Captain Seung-ho Park guided his scout ship through the twisted metal graveyard that floated where Kepler Station used to be. 5 years ago, this had been humanity's first attempt at a deep space colony in the outer rim. Now it was a monument to how much humans had learned about survival in the dark space beyond civilization. The wreckage told a story of desperate innovation. Blast marks on hull fragments showed where human weapons had failed against something that ate metal and energy alike. But newer scars revealed different weapons, stranger technologies that had finally stopped whatever destroyed the original station. Dr. Yoo-jin-oh floated beside him in her environmental suit, taking readings with instruments that had not existed when humans first entered exile. Her mobile laboratory ship Endurance hung nearby, its hull covered with adaptive armor that shifted and flowed like living tissue as sensors detected potential threats in the surrounding void. The Void Hunters hit this place 3 years ago, Yoo-jin said through the comm system as she examined a piece of station wall. But look at these secondary damage patterns. Something fought them off using directed gravitational pulses. Seung-ho nodded as he recognized the signature. Humans had learned to weaponize gravity itself after their first encounters with the energy parasites that lived in the empty spaces between stars. The creatures that Council scientists had dismissed as impossible were very real in the outer rim, and they had nearly wiped out human civilization in the first 2 years of exile. The Void Hunters were the least of the horrors that waited in the dark, mechanical swarms that converted entire planets into more copies of themselves, ancient automated defense systems that activated when they detected advanced technology, living nebulae that absorbed organic matter and used it to grow larger. The Council had exiled humans to a region of space that was actively hostile to any form of life. Admiral Woo-jin Lee stood in the command center of Terminus Station, the massive fortress that humans had carved from a dead moon at the edge of known space. Around him, holographic displays showed the current state of human civilization in exile. What he saw would have amazed the Council members who had expected humanity to collapse within years. 50 billion humans had become something new. The petty divisions that had existed in Council space were gone. Earth colonies, Mars industrial centers, asteroid mining operations, and deep space explorers had merged into a single culture focused entirely on survival against impossible odds. New. Shanghai floated in the vacuum around a neutron star, its inhabitants using the intense gravity to power manufacturing systems that created materials stronger than anything in Council space. The colonists had learned to live with radiation that would kill most aliens in minutes. They had adapted their own biology to survive in conditions that made toxic waste dumps look comfortable. Forge World Busan orbited a black hole so closely that time moved slower there than in normal space. Human engineers used this time dilation effect to conduct research projects that would take centuries in real time. They had developed technologies that bent the basic laws of physics and made them into tools. But the greatest change was in human military doctrine. Admiral Wu Jin commanded a fleet that had been forged in constant battle against enemies that conventional weapons could not touch. His ships were not the clean, standardized vessels that Council militaries preferred. They were adaptive nightmares covered with weapons and armor that evolved after every battle. The destroyer-class ships looked like mechanical predators with hulls that rippled with electromagnetic fields. Cruisers resembled metallic sea creatures that could extend sensor tendrils for thousands of kilometers. Battleships were floating cities protected by shields that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Captain Min-Soo Kim piloted one of these new warships through a patrol route that would have been suicide for any Council vessel. His ship Retribution moved through a field of quantum mines left by some ancient civilization. The weapons were designed to detonate when they detected organized matter above a certain complexity threshold. But human technology had learned to appear random and chaotic to automated sensors. Retribution's hull shifted patterns constantly, its energy signature mimicked natural phenomena, and its computer systems ran on quantum processors that existed partially outside normal space-time. To the ancient minds, it looked like just another piece of cosmic debris. "Contact bearing 27 Mark 8, reported Sensors Officer Yoon Kyung Lee from her station. "Mechanical swarm approaching from the direction of the Helix Nebula." Min-Soo felt the familiar surge of combat readiness that all humans in the Outer Rim had developed. These encounters happened weekly as automated systems from dead civilizations continued their programming millions of years after their creators had vanished. Each battle taught humanity something new about survival in a hostile universe. The swarm appeared on visual displays as a cloud of metallic insects the size of shuttlecraft. Each unit was equipped with molecular disassemblers that could break down any material and convert it into more swarm units. A single scout that made contact with a populated world could consume an entire planet within months. But humans had fought these swarms dozens of times and learned their weaknesses. The mechanical units were individually intelligent, but their collective decision-making followed predictable patterns. They prioritized certain types of targets and could be lured into tactical mistakes. Retribution launched a spread of hunter-killer drones that immediately began broadcasting false signals. To swarm sensors, each drone appeared to be a small colony, ship filled with organic material perfect for conversion. The mechanical units abandoned their search pattern and swarmed toward the apparent prey. As the swarm concentrated on the drones, Min-Soo activated weapons that the Council would have considered impossible. Retribution's main guns fired rounds of crystallized space-time that existed in several dimensions simultaneously. When they hit swarm units, the mechanical beings simply ceased to exist across all possible timelines. The battle was over in minutes with the entire swarm neutralized. Min-Soo ordered recovery teams to collect any intact swarm technology for study. Human scientists had learned to reverse engineer captured systems and improve on the original designs. Each encounter made humanity stronger and more adaptable. Communications. Officer Soo-Jin Kim monitored signals from throughout human space as she coordinated with other patrol ships. The network that connected human colonies was unlike anything in Council territory. Instead of rigid hierarchical communications, humans used adaptive mesh networks that could route around any damage. Messages traveled through quantum entanglement, gravitational wave modulation, and exotic matter transmissions that existed outside normal space. Even if entire star systems were destroyed, the human communication network would automatically reconfigure and continue operating. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from New Geneva Colony," Soo-Jin reported. "They're requesting technical specifications for dealing with what they call a temporal predator." Woo-Jin authorized the data transfer without hesitation. In the Outer Rim, information was shared freely between all human settlements. Every colony's survival depended on the knowledge gained by others. Competition and secrecy were luxuries that humanity could no longer afford. The temporal predator was a new type of threat that existed partially outside normal time. It fed on the temporal energy generated by advanced civilizations and could age entire planets to dust in hours. New Geneva had detected one approaching their system and needed weapons that could hit targets that existed in the past and future simultaneously. Such weapons existed in the human arsenal now, not because humans had always been able to build them, but because 5 years of constant threat had forced them to innovate beyond anything they had achieved in Council space. Every impossibility had become just another engineering problem to solve. Dr. Yoo Jin-oh transmitted her latest research findings to the collective human database. She had discovered that the Void Hunters were not natural creatures but artificial, life forms created by an ancient species as weapons of war. Understanding their origin had led to new methods of defense and even techniques for turning them against other threats. The data joined thousands of other research projects in the growing library of human knowledge about the Outer Rim. Biologists had mapped the life cycles of creatures that existed in pure vacuum. Physicists had learned to manipulate forces that had no names in council languages. Engineers had built structures that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. But perhaps the most important discovery was about humanity itself. The exile had stripped away everything except the core of what made humans dangerous, not their aggression or their weapons, but their absolute refusal to accept that any problem was unsolvable. When faced with impossible odds, humans did not give up. They adapted until the impossible became merely difficult. Navigation Officer Dong Wook Park updated star charts that showed human expansion into regions that council maps marked as permanently uninhabitable. Colonies now existed in systems with unstable stars, on worlds with poisonous atmospheres, and in space itself, where artificial habitats floated in the void between planets. Admiral Kyung-ho Jang watched through the tactical display aboard his dreadnought Retribution as the Council fleet died in the cold vacuum of the Proxima system. The alien ships had been magnificent once with their ceremonial decorations and perfect formations that spoke of 1,000 years of unchallenged dominance. Now they were burning debris scattered across space like broken toys. The mechanical swarm that was destroying them had broken through the containment barriers that humans had maintained for 3 years. But this was not an accident or a failure of human technology. The swarm had been deliberately released as a test of Council military capabilities. The results were exactly what human intelligence had predicted. Captain Haya Jin Choi stood in the intelligence center of Terminus Station, monitoring communications from across Council space as panic spread through their networks. Her teams had been watching alien transmissions for months as signs of the coming disaster became obvious to anyone who understood Outer Rim threats. The Zenthari Third Fleet just lost contact with their homeworld, reported intelligence analyst Jong-Soo Park, as he tracked the spreading chaos. The swarm reached their orbital defenses 6 hours ago. Hyejin nodded without emotion as she marked another system as compromised on the tactical display. The mechanical plague was following the same pattern it always did when released into populated space. It targeted the largest concentrations of organized matter first, which meant heavily developed council worlds were dying while primitive colonies remained untouched. The irony was perfect. The Council had spent centuries building the most advanced civilization in galactic history. Their worlds were covered with cities that reached into orbit. Their space was filled with massive industrial platforms and transport networks. All of it was exactly what the mechanical swarms had been designed to consume. Communications Officer Min-ji Lee intercepted desperate messages from Council military commanders who were learning that their weapons were completely useless against an adaptive enemy. Energy beams that could crack planets barely scratched swarm units that absorbed the energy and used it to replicate faster. Kinetic weapons that could punch through starship armor were simply incorporated into swarm mass. "They're requesting immediate technical assistance," Min-ji said as she filtered through hundreds of emergency transmissions. "Some of them are offering territorial concessions in exchange for anti-swarm technology." But territorial concessions meant nothing when the territory in question was being converted into more mechanical units. The Council was discovering what humans had learned the hard way during their first encounters with Outer Rim threats. Conventional military thinking was worse than useless against enemies that operated by completely different rules. Dr. Sang-Woo Kim monitored the situation from his research station aboard the Deep Space Laboratory Horizon. His instruments could track the swarm's progression through Council space with terrifying precision. The mechanical units were not just consuming material randomly. They were following optimized patterns that would strip each system of resources in the most efficient way possible. "They're exhibiting coordinated behavior across multiple star systems," Sang-Woo reported to the Human Command Network. "This is not a simple replication event. The swarm is following strategic objectives that suggest high-level artificial intelligence." This was new information that even human scientists found disturbing. Previous swarm encounters had been with smaller groups that showed only tactical intelligence. A swarm that could think strategically across interstellar distances was a threat of an entirely different magnitude. But humans had advantages that the Council lacked. 5 years of fighting impossible odds had taught them to expect the unexpected and prepare for threats that broke all conventional rules. Human colonies were already implementing Protocol 7, the defensive measures developed for exactly this type of scenario. Captain Ji-won Park commanded the human colony ship New Horizon as it evacuated non-essential personnel from border systems. But this was not a panicked retreat like the Council worlds were experiencing. Human evacuation procedures had been refined through dozens of emergency drills and actual combat situations. All civilian transports are clear of the danger zone, reported Navigation Officer Tae-hyun Lee as he coordinated the complex movement of ships through space that was becoming increasingly hostile. Military units are maintaining containment positions around the primary swarm mass. The containment was not meant to stop the swarm completely. Human strategists had calculated that the mechanical plague needed to reach Council space in order to teach the aliens a necessary lesson about the true nature of Outer Rim threats. But they also needed to ensure that the lesson did not destroy galactic civilization entirely. Human ships shadowed the swarm as it moved deeper into Council territory, using quantum tracking devices to monitor every unit and predict future expansion patterns. When the mechanical plague tried to spread beyond its designated target zones, human weapons would quietly eliminate the excess units without the Council ever knowing they had been protected. Admiral Myung-ho Song coordinated these shadow operations from his command ship Vengeance, maintaining perfect stealth while Council fleets died around him. His ships used technology that made them invisible to both swarm sensors and Council detection systems. To outside observers, the humans had simply vanished from the galaxy, but human intelligence networks continued to function throughout Council space. Sleeper agents who had been planted decades earlier now activated to provide real-time information about alien military responses. The data they collected would help human strategists plan for the next phase of the crisis. The Void Hunters arrived exactly when human predictive models said they would. The massive energy expenditures from Council defense efforts created a beacon that could be detected across half the galaxy. The energy parasites followed that signal like predators following the scent of wounded prey. Unlike the mechanical swarms, Void Hunters could not be fought with conventional weapons at all. They existed partially outside normal space-time and fed on the fundamental forces that held matter together. Council scientists had no theoretical framework for even understanding what they were facing. Research Director In-Soo Choi watched from the Human Deep Space Monitoring Station as the first Void Hunter made contact with a Council fleet. The alien ships simply stopped existing as their molecular bonds were dissolved and the energy was absorbed by the creature. No explosion, no debris, just empty space where a battle group had been moments before. The Council is requesting emergency evacuation assistance for their core worlds, reported communications specialist Sun Kyung Kim as desperate transmissions flooded human receivers. They're offering complete technological exchange for refugee transport services, but human refugee ships were already at maximum capacity, evacuating their own border colonies from the expanding threat zones. The exile had taught humanity to prioritize their own survival above all other considerations. Council civilians would have to find their own escape routes. The ancient Guardian systems activated right on schedule. Human archaeologists had discovered evidence of these automated defenses years earlier and calculated when they would respond to the chaos spreading through Council space. The Guardians were programmed to eliminate any civilization that showed signs of repeating the mistakes that had destroyed their creators. Council space lit up like a target range as Guardian weapons began systematically destroying the most advanced installations in each system. Orbital platforms that had taken centuries to build vanished in seconds. Industrial complexes that powered entire sectors were reduced to elementary particles. The technological achievements that the Council had been most proud of became liabilities that painted targets on their backs. Strategic analyst Chang-ho Park updated human tactical assessments as each new threat multiplied the chaos in Council territory. The aliens were facing a perfect storm of dangers that they had no experience fighting. Each enemy required completely different defensive strategies, and the Council military was designed for conventional warfare between organized fleets. They're experiencing cascade failure across their entire defense network, Chang-ho reported to Admiral Kyung-ho Jang. Estimated time to complete collapse of Central Authority is 6 weeks unless they receive massive external assistance. But the only force in the galaxy capable of providing that assistance was humanity. And humans were no longer interested in rescuing ungrateful aliens from problems of their own making. The Council had chosen to exile humanity rather than listen to warnings about outer rim dangers. Now they would learn why those warnings had been necessary. Dr. Yojin Song analyzed the psychological impact of the crisis on Council leadership through intercepted communications. The aliens who had been so confident about their superior civilization were discovering that their technology and tactics were primitive compared to the threats that humans had been fighting for years. They're starting to understand that we weren't the dangerous ones, Yojin observed as she reviewed transcripts of Council emergency sessions. We were the only ones capable of protecting them from real danger.